Thank you, Sabine, and good afternoon, everyone. As you can see on the screen, we have some key findings from our report. The first finding is that the CAP's allocation model structurally locks in animal-based protein systems. The CAP is the EU's largest spending program, accounting for 378 billion in the 2021-2027 period. And following the money, the striking reality is that roughly 82% of that support directly or indirectly sustains livestock and feed dependent systems. More than 70% of the EU agricultural land is linked to livestock, and two-thirds of the EU cereal production is used as animal feed and not for food. The second finding is that the CAP contributes to EU dependence on important protein feed. Concretely, this means that 94% of the soy protein used by EU livestock is imported, mostly from Brazil, Argentina, and the United States. The same CAP framework that should support strategic autonomy is in fact reinforcing our dependence on global feed markets. The third finding is that a significant share of EU agricultural expenditure sustains emission-intensive feed-dependent systems. Once you include feed production, livestock accounts for up to 86% of total EU agricultural emissions. The CAP basically is helping to fund that footprint. Now we can advance to the second slide regarding the legal framework. The first point is that the CAP's current allocation pattern is increasingly misaligned with EU law and policy frameworks that impose binding obligations on how EU money is spent. We talk about the principles of environmental integration, respect of animals as sentient beings, and the 55% emissions reduction target for 2030 set by the EU climate law. And the Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategy, and the EU's plant protein autonomy objective all point towards the same way. CAP allocation is increasingly out of step with all these targets. The second point is that CAP spending is now subject to growing judicial scrutiny. This shift towards accountability is no longer hypothetical because recent climate and environmental litigation across Europe show that courts are increasingly willing to examine whether public expenditure programs remain consistent with binding EU commitments, and the CAP will not be an exception. So we can advance to the final slide about our recommendation. Basically, okay. The central proposal of the report, the first item on screen, is that 20% of the support currently benefiting livestock and feed-dependent systems should be reallocated towards plant-based proteins for human consumption. A fiscally neutral measure which is structurally transformative. It still leaves most of the CAP support directly to livestock, but it does four things at once. Firstly, it delivers coupled support, agri-environmental actions, and investment aid for legumes, pulses, and other plant proteins for food. Second, it is phased, starting from a 5% by 2030 up to a 20% by 2034, giving farmers and member states time to adapt. Thirdly, it builds the missing value chain, storage, processing, and market access. Fourth, it draws a clear legal line between protein crops for food and protein crops for feed. The second recommendation on screen is the indispensable other half of the equation. Without demand-side measures, which means public procurement, market incentives, dietary guidelines, the CAP reform alone will not deliver a sustainable food transition. Supply and demand have to move together. So, to conclude, the post-2027 CAP is being decided now. It will run until 2034, and this is the window. The question is no longer whether the CAP will change, but whether it will change proactively through policy or reactively through the courts. And we are ready for that evidence. Thank you. I look forward to the conversation with